Number one is the best blockchain, so it's fastest, it is also most used, but on the other side, it's undervalued. It's 5 times cheaper than Ethereum, but it's also yield generating because, staking generates roughly 7%. And if you use that solid DeFi, you can go up to, 10, 12% easily. 60% stocks, 40% bonds doesn't protect you anymore.
GM, welcome back to Solana Floor. Today we're joined by Viktor Fischer, who's the founder and CEO of RockawayX, which has been around since 2018, and they're backing some of the biggest names in the Solana ecosystem. Now, we're going to unpack what exactly is still missing before we get to broader institutional adoption and Solana's next big leg up. But I also want to know how ETFs could essentially serve as a further stamp of approval for Solana, because I think Viktor's thesis titled Why Solana is something that really fundamentally challenges the way people see the Solana ecosystem. Viktor, Jim, welcome to Solana Floor. I want to start with you before we get to the Solana thesis. So what is it that Rockaway does fundamentally, and how do you explain it to both people within the Solana ecosystem and traditional investors that are interested in learning more?
Yeah, so we are a bit, I would say, like Citadel on-chain. So fully vertically integrated engineering and investment firm. So all the way from just the bottom of the tech stack, we are now running optical cable infrastructure for 00, running best performance bare metal validators for Solana and other 50 blockchains. That's part of our engineering division. On top of it, we have our liquidity division where we run solvers, for example, for Mayan protocol. So you want to shift, 100K from Ethereum or Base to Solana, 75% probability will go through our solvers. We also have an on-chain market making division that's part of our liquidity division, and we also provide loans to DeFi. And lastly, we have an investment division where we have venture funds and a hedge fund which invest into early stage tokens, but also later stage tokens which we deem undervalued. That's what we do at RockawayX.
Perfect. So I want to dive straight in, Viktor. Obviously, you're a subject matter expert when it comes to explaining why Solana is attractive for institutions. You talk to people within the industry, you talk to investors from outside the industry. So I want to talk about the deck that you created. It's titled Why Solana, and it delineates, I think, very effectively the bull case for Solana. So when you discuss the viability of Solana, both as an ecosystem, as an asset, as an infrastructure, what are the key points that you focus on mostly?
Yeah, and it's all written, as you say, in whysolana.com deck. And it's basically two reasons. Number one is the best blockchain. So it's the fastest. It is also most used. So it has 30 times more addresses and 100 times more daily transactions than Ethereum. But on the other side, it's undervalued. It's 5 times cheaper than Ethereum on fully diluted market cap. And when I speak with traditional investors, they always think, what is the high growth yield generating asset that they can include in their portfolio? And so, Solana is high growth because it's undervalued, is most used, but it's also yield generating because, staking generates roughly 7%. And if you use that solid DeFi, you can go up to, 10, 12% easily.
Is that the single most attractive element to traditional investors then, the upside potential? Or do they think maybe from an ideological perspective, hey, I'd like to be aligned with something that isn't so traditional?
Look, I had a call yesterday, a long call with Dr. Arthur Laffer. He sits on the board of Soulmate DAT, where we also invested. And I also sit on the board. And he was just, he's the inventor of the Laffer curve. And maybe you heard about the Laffer curve. It basically says that, the more taxes you charge your population, the less revenue you get as a country. And I think same applies also here because Solana is so cheap, 0.004 cents for every transaction versus Ethereum, $1, $2 in spikes, $100, $200 per transaction. And the more you are charging your users, the less they want to transact. And, Dr. Arthur Laffer understood this immediately. And then he also understood the vision that basically digital financial services are moving on a blockchain, and we are kind of in like a high frequency trading world. Right now, the ping time between Frankfurt, where you have most of the Solana validators, and Tokyo, where you have matching engines, is like 200 milliseconds. It's way too long. So, I explained him the 00 network that we are also helping to build to basically bring the speeds down to, just a couple of milliseconds. And so in addition to high growth asset and yield generating, he understood the vision of basically global NASDAQ
synchronized at the speed of light. Absolutely. And I do find it fascinating what, Austin Federa and his team have achieved at Double Zero over the last 6 to 12 months. It's been immense progress. They're building, basically rebuilding the internet for high performance distributed systems, which is fascinating innovation. For anyone who doesn't already know about it, go and check it out. And I'm curious, when you discuss these innovations, when it comes to rebuilding the physical infrastructure of the world such that blockchain systems can function faster, are they more long-term focused when they think about Solana, or is it of a more short-term asset appreciation thesis? No, they're absolutely long-term focused. And it's both reasons. Yeah, if you look at why Solana.com deck, you see at the bottom, I put a chart of how US dollar has been losing its value over time. And also, the all-weather portfolio, 60-40 portfolio in the current inflation doesn't protect you anymore, against like a market drops, 60% stocks, 40% bonds doesn't protect you anymore. And Dr. Arthur Laffer, just like other traditional investors, they understand this. They understand that for the long-term protection of their portfolio, they have to have a high growth, yield generating asset like Solana in their portfolio. But this is just asset allocation perspective. That's number one. And number two, I would say, is the application perspective, where we tell them, look, like, the financial system is so broken. Basically, the financial system of banks is still programmed in COBOL, like, programming language invented in the 70s. Programmers are not around anymore, those who programmed it. And the financial systems of banks are synchronized overnight. Recently I was sending some money to my family from, let's say, from Middle East to Europe, and it got stuck for a week. Yeah, and I think it's a crime against humanity that in 2025, we still wait for a week for just, one cross-border transaction to go through. I think money should be sent like an email. And I think, I was born in a communist country, and I was lacking this freedom of, being able to just invest in US stocks. And now, thanks to blockchain, you can do it globally, instantly, with just a smartphone and connection to Solana, or X stocks, for example. And this is what traditional finance investors, they understand. So it's the fact that we are changing how financial services are running on the internet. Clear. And you touched on remittances and cross-border payments there, which of course is one of the core tenets of blockchain technology, being able to transact P2P almost instantly anywhere in the world. And the Genius Act has been immensely beneficial for stablecoin growth on Solana as well. I believe this morning, late last night, we reached $16 billion of stablecoins issued on Solana for the first time ever. Massive achievement. But I'm curious, which other vertical within the Solana ecosystem do you see, let's say, the most growth potential currently? Is it something like DePIN? Is it tokenization? Is it purely DeFi and financial applications? Or might something like agentic AI make a resurgence and see massive amounts of growth in the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months? Where do you see the most growth coming from? I think we are still lagging behind significantly in stablecoins. And just like Mert tweeted yesterday, we still have to do significant work to have stablecoins grow. 16 billion is still 10 times less than on Ethereum network. And we still have to do a lot of work around just perps trading volume. Yeah, perps is also an innovation of blockchain ecosystem, and I think we are definitely lagging behind Solana as well. So there is still a lot of work in front of us. Personally, where I am very excited is yield. So for me, when I look at blockchains, basically applications and use cases. Use case number one was trading. And, trading volume is still 50 billion per day on spot, and 20% of that 10 billion on DEXs. And this is great. It's like half of NASDAQ daily trading volume. It's not bad. And so trading as a use case is here to stay. People will always want to trade on blockchains. That's one. Second is stablecoins. And, completely disruptive technology where we can send instantly money across the world. Third use case for me is yield on chain. In traditional finance, yield sources are very siloed. You have, for example, a credit fund of Apollo where you have to have a minimum ticket size of 500,000 to invest. And I want to disrupt that. I think we need to have much better yield sources on Solana. And so that's why we invested into ONRE Finance, for example, ONRE, ONRE, like on-chain reinsurance, where you can use
Ethena stablecoin as a collateral for reinsurance. Let's say Ethena generates 8%, underlying reinsurance generates 12%. And so by investing stablecoins into onry.finance, you generate 20% base yield. And that's already amazing. Like where else? Just open your bank account. Do your banks offer you like 20% yield? Of course they don't.
Not even
Like
close.
even our friends at Galaxy One, I love them, respect them, but they just launched Galaxy One app with 8% yield on USDC. I'm not interested. For me, interesting yields are like 12% plus. And on the blockchain, we can do that. And particularly, we can do that on Solana. And that's where I'm focused. And second reason is also because of DeFi composability. Because now that I have, an LP token which represents my position in on refinance, I can borrow against it on Camino or Loopscale, and I can potentially loop it and generate even more yield. This in traditional finance, like investing in reinsurance is already tough. There are barriers to entry. And second, to borrow against your position, you would have to employ like an army of lawyers. Banks would charge you. And it's just a, couple of clicks on Solana and Phantom Wallet. That's amazing. That's what excites me.
Absolutely. It really is exciting. You mentioned there very briefly that we still have work to do. So I'm curious from your perspective and the perspective of some of the investors that you talk to, some of your colleagues, what are those infrastructural improvements that still need to be improved, need to be worked on, such that we do get wider adoption of things like stablecoins, such that we can facilitate more perps volume, maybe DATCOs become even more interested, maybe further ETFs like BlackRock issues an ETF. That would be amazing. So what are some of these infrastructural improvements or structural improvements rather that we still need to
Yeah.
work on?
I don't think it's about infrastructure at this stage. Yes, like, consensus is improving, shifting to Alpenglow, and we'll have multiple concurrent leaders and application specific sequencing. Nobody cares in traditional world. People really don't care. But I think where we are lagging behind in Solana is institutional adoption. Look at the trading volume of all DATs. And last time I looked, I think yesterday was like $120 million daily on Solana across all DATs. All Ethereum DATs, 30 times more, like over $3 billion daily, which means that traditional finance investors on NASDAQ prefer trading Ethereum as an underlying asset much more than Solana as an underlying asset, which means that they still did not understand why Solana is better. That's why we created whysolana.com deck. But I think all DAT leaders, CEOs and chairmen of all these amazing Solana DAT companies we now have, they have to promote Solana as an underlying asset to the TradFi audience. Just like Tommy Lee is doing it on CNBC every day, saying Ethereum will grow to $60,000. Like 2 days ago, he said, yeah. Like I think we have to stop arguing on crypto Twitter who is smarter in terms of like new consensus algorithm and multiple concurrent leaders and GTOBAM and whatnot. Nobody cares. It's just, I would say, our own kind of insecurity, because it's easier to chat on crypto Twitter with friends who is smarter. But what really takes courage is to go on CNBC and explain to TradFi investors why Solana is better. And I think that's where us as an ecosystem, we have to do a serious step up.
So I think many people within the Solana ecosystem would fundamentally agree with you. And one of the discussions that's evolved from this in recent months is that Bitcoin has Michael Saylor, arguably the biggest and best Bitcoin bull of all time. Ethereum now has its own spokesperson, as you mentioned, claiming that it will one day hit 60,000. Who will fill that role for Solana? So far, it seems we have Kyle Samani. We have Mert, as you mentioned, who's very active on crypto Twitter. But I get the sense from listening to your response there that you feel we're stuck a little bit too much in an echo chamber on crypto Twitter, and we're arguing amongst ourselves, and that the total addressable market of that communication is unfortunately limited to the single platform that we communicate on. So who's going to fill that role, if not Kyle Samani, if not Mert? Who can do it?
Look, I don't know, and I don't think it's important. I think all of the ATs, whether it's James and Alice behind STSS, it's Marco and me behind Soulmate, it's Kyle and Jump and Galaxy, behind Ford. I think and of course the TFDV, Upexi guys, Joseph, like all of us, we just have to do a significant step up. And it's a bit like startup investing, yeah, like you invest into more founders, and then you get more of a concentrated effort. So I think all of us need to do a step up, and if there is a one leader, it will form itself if it's more of us, even better.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed. Hopefully we get that leader that we're looking for very, very soon. And I want to switch our attention very quickly to ETFs. Now, it's been given a 100% chance of approval this year by experts. It has. Well, this is all speculation, and this is coming from a Bloomberg terminal, not from official sources. But we have, people like James Seyfarth and Eric Balchunas, who are arguably the most knowledgeable analysts when it comes to ETF approvals. They follow the BTC and ETH ETF processes very closely. So this was before, mind, the US government shutdown, which now threatens to delay the process by at least a couple of weeks. So I'm curious, first of all, what your thoughts on the ETF approval process are. Are we facing any hurdles there, or have all the regulatory hurdles been cleared? And do you really think it's going to be the bullish catalyst that we expected, or is it going to be even more bullish than we expect? What are your thoughts about the ETF approval process and what might follow?
Look, I think I'm not an expert on ETFs, but last time I looked, I think it was yesterday, I saw 95% chance of approval. I think we are still missing BlackRock as a potential issuer. I think, we should do that work, make sure BlackRock is also opening, maybe ARK Invest also opening Solana ETF. That would be great. For me, why it's important is because this would be a confirmation by the SEC that Solana is a utility, is a commodity, and not a security. And this is critical for, especially all the ATs, but also for us as an industry. So that's why I'm looking forward to that. I personally get an exposure to Solana via ETF, probably not. I would through a Solana DAT, especially one which has like low fees and is able to generate excellent yield in staking and an excellent yield on top, leveraging DeFi. That's what I would do. But I think we need ETFs. But then for me, DATs are much better exposure vehicle for traditional finance investors.
So the exposure aside and the level of on-chain activity aside, which of these two vehicles between DATCOs and ETFs do you think is going to have the most buy pressure on SOL as an asset and therefore maybe indirectly make people that are within the Solana ecosystem slightly happier? Which one is going to be more of a buy force?
I think still ETFs because probably of, especially if we get BlackRock because of their distribution network. But I would say, for me as an investor, DATs are better because of the yield they are able to generate. ETFs will not be able to leverage DeFi and DATs will. So, I'll be looking at DATs which are able to generate, 10% plus, not just like 6 or 7% base staking yield, but 10%. 13, maybe 15%, and that would be amazing.
Can you give me a quick rundown of which DATs specifically you're talking about here that generate the highest amounts of yield by leveraging some of these DeFi opportunities? If you had to name 2 or 3.
Look, I don't know yet because we still need to wait until the end of the first quarter for all of the DATs to publish their numbers. But I know what we are doing at Soulmate, and it's basically everything you can imagine. So like staking, liquid staking, DeFi yield through Camino, leveraging options, and then for me it's a no-brainer. I want to provide particularly Soulmate as a one-stop shop for Solana exposure with the highest yield.
Some people might argue that exposes you to slightly higher risk as well. Let's say in the event of a black swan event that causes massive price depreciation in Solana. How do you manage some of that risk?
Look, like part of RockawayX, we have one of the largest credit funds in the industry, oldest. So we started to land into DeFi in 2022, right before Luna crashed, if you remember.
Vividly.
And we had, $6 million in Anchor protocol, which we had to get out when our risk dashboards were flashing red. And so I think, since launching that fund early 2022, I think, we were able to implement different kinds of like risk dashboards. And, we never had a negative month. We never had a default. We never had a negative year. Our credit fund is yielding 15% net per annum with super low volatility, Sharpe ratio of 9. And I just want to use that expertise for the DAT as well.
Excellent. And where did the Why Solana deck / website come to your mind? What was the inspiration for it?
So it was just around Solana Accelerate in New York. And then with all Ethereum DATs coming around, and I saw how much Ethereum DATs helped to form Ethereum story. All of us on crypto Twitter, we thought Ethereum was dead. And then, TradFi investors came and they helped to double Ethereum price, within just a couple of weeks at the beginning of summer. And so then I reached out to Solana Foundation. I told them, hey, we need to have a Tom Lee kind of personalities. We need to have DATs and we need to have one narrative. And so I volunteered to create whysolana.com deck. And, they've been very helpful and supportive, and Akshay and Bibu and and all the people in Solana Foundation are excellent and gave me so many ideas how to make it a good deck.
Excellent. Any final remarks for the Solana ecosystem?
Yeah, I would just say, job's not done. Like, we have so much work ahead of us. And, when I'm using Solana and other blockchains, I can really see, like the average trader on pump.fun. So the best trader on pump.fun has an average holding period of 4 minutes. I think as an ecosystem, like it's for sure it's a use case, but I think as an ecosystem, we have to also have use cases, as we said, like stable coins and yield on chain, which are more, oriented towards more sustainable business models, I would say. Although I have some ideas how I would improve Pump.Fun. Just briefly, I think Pump.Fun should shift into an Instagram-like application. Right now, the incentive of Pump.Fun, as soon as you open the app, you have just the plus button at the bottom to issue new tokens. The best trader on Pump.Fun, not only his average holding period was 4 minutes, but also launched 120 tokens. And I just don't think this is sustainable. I think Pump.Fun should shift into one Instagram-like application where one token is basically just one Instagram page, which you really curate. You put videos and pictures, you engage with your community, not only live streams, but also, offline content. And that's where I think Pump.Fun should focus on, because I'd like to shift the entire Solana usage from, 4 minutes average holding period to years average holding period. That's my dream.
Looking forward to that development. Viktor, I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your experiences. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to catching up hopefully very soon.
Thank you so much.